Duke Alistair Harrow locked his wife outside in the snow and announced that any servant who helped her would be dismissed. Duchess Elowen's crime, he claimed, was encouraging hungry tenants to steal from his forest. She stood before the closed iron gates with blood on her gloves, not from a slaughtered deer, but from a pregnant doe she had tried to save after finding it pierced by an unusual black-feathered arrow. Alistair had not examined the weapon. His mother had called it proof of Elowen's guilt, and his wounded pride had supplied the verdict. "You may spend the night among the animals you value above your own name," Alistair had said. Then he had turned his back on her. Now snow collected in Elowen's dark hair and melted against her cheeks like cold tears. Her wool cloak had been taken from her during the confrontation, leaving her in a mud-stained riding dress. She could still see faces watching through the illuminated windows of Harrow Hall. None of the servants dared move. "Your Grace!" Mrs. Wren, the elderly housekeeper, appeared behind the gates carrying a blanket. Before she could pass it through the bars, the new gamekeeper seized her arm. "You heard His Grace's command." Silas Rook was broad-shouldered, with a crooked mouth and leather gloves that never appeared to leave his hands. He pulled the blanket away and dropped it into the snow on his side of the gate. Elowen stepped forward. "Release her." Rook obeyed, though his smile remained. "Still issuing orders, Your Grace? I will continue doing so whenever you mistreat someone under my protection." "Protection?" Dowager Duchess Lavinia's voice floated from the steps. "You have protected thieves, poachers, and every ungrateful tenant who refuses to pay what this family is owed." Her silver hair shone beneath the entrance lamps. Alistair stood beside her, rigid in his black evening coat. Elowen met her husband's gaze. "Ask Rook why every deer found dead this month carried the same black-feathered arrow. Ask why none of the meat was taken. Starving men do not kill merely to leave food rotting in the snow." Alistair's jaw tightened. For one fleeting moment, she saw uncertainty in his face. He could have opened the gate. He could have taken the arrow from her and ordered an inquiry. Instead, he looked toward the guests gathered behind his mother. "You publicly accused an officer in my service without proof," he said. "You then hid the accused tenants in the West Lodge and refused my command to surrender them. They have children. They have broken the law, and you have already judged them without hearing them." A murmur passed among the watching guests. Alistair's expression hardened as the challenge struck the pride his mother had been feeding for months. The gates remained closed until morning. He turned and entered the house. Lavinia followed, satisfied. Rook lingered long enough to give Elowen a small, deliberate bow. As he straightened, she noticed a black feather caught in the stitching of his right glove. Then he stepped away from the light. Elowen waited until the household disappeared inside before moving toward the forest. Remaining by the gates would accomplish nothing, except allowing Lavinia to exhibit her punishment from the windows. Her left hand throbbed where the wounded doe had kicked her. More troubling was the burning numbness spreading through her fingers. She had smelled something bitter on the arrowhead when she pulled it free. Aconite, perhaps, mixed with an oily substance meant to keep the poison from freezing. Poachers did not ordinarily poison deer. They certainly did not leave valuable carcasses untouched. She had gone no more than 50 yards when a howl rose between the trees. Another answered from the eastern ridge. Elowen stopped. 7 gray shapes emerged along the tree line, their paws soundless against the snow. The largest was a scarred male she recognized. 2 winters earlier, she had freed him from an iron trap while Alistair held a pistol ready in case the animal attacked. The wolf looked at her now without approaching. Then, every animal turned toward a carriage half buried beside the frozen road. It was Elowen's carriage. She had left it near the forester's cottage that afternoon before following the trail of blood to the wounded doe. Her driver and horses were gone. One door stood open, swaying slightly in the wind. The wolves surrounded the vehicle. A lantern appeared behind Elowen. Silas Rook emerged from the gatehouse with 2 armed gamekeepers. "Step away from that carriage," he called. The scarred wolf bared his teeth. Rook raised his rifle. "No." Elowen moved between him and the animal. "Lower the weapon. This forest is no longer your concern. Then why are you so concerned about what lies inside my carriage?" His eyes shifted toward the open door. That single glance answered more than words could have done. Elowen ran. A shot cracked behind her. Snow burst from the ground beside her boot, but Rook had aimed deliberately wide. He wanted to frighten her, not kill her in sight of the house. She reached the carriage and climbed inside. The seats had been slashed. Beneath them lay torn papers, sealing wax, and a broken leather case. Elowen gathered the scattered pages before the wind could carry them away. They were ledgers. Each recorded payments for weapons, hired riders, and shipments delivered through Harrow's northern boundary. Beside several entries were the names of tenants who had petitioned Alistair against the recent rent increases. The final page contained only one sentence: remove the Duchess before the royal inspection. Beneath it appeared Alistair's signature. The date was 3 days before the alleged poaching had begun. Elowen stared at the familiar strokes. The shape was convincing, but the pressure was wrong. Alistair always dragged his pen slightly when forming the final letter of his name. Whoever had written this had copied its appearance, not its movement. Rook's footsteps drew closer. Elowen folded the page and pushed it beneath her bodice. As she reached for the remaining ledger, her blood-stained fingers left a red mark beside a list of shipments. The ink smeared. It was still wet. These records had not been abandoned earlier that day. Someone had placed them inside her carriage only minutes ago. A low sound came from beneath the opposite seat. Not a growl, a human breath. Elowen pulled away the torn upholstery and found a man curled inside the hidden compartment. His coat bore the insignia of the Royal Survey Office, and an arrow with black feathers protruded from his shoulder. His eyes opened. "Duchess," he whispered, gripping her wrist. "Do not let your husband sign the boundary deed." Outside, Rook cocked his rifle. The wounded man dragged Elowen closer and forced out 5 more words. "The forest hides a royal grave." Elowen pressed one hand over the wounded man's mouth as Silas Rook's boots stopped beside the carriage. "Come out, Your Grace." The surveyor's eyes widened. His skin was gray beneath the dirt, and each breath trembled through his body. Elowen examined the arrow protruding from his shoulder. Its black feathers matched the shaft she had removed from the pregnant doe. She leaned close to his ear. "Remain still." The carriage door opened. Rook stood outside with his rifle angled toward the floor. Behind him waited 2 gamekeepers, Nathan Crowell and Peter Voss. Both had served the estate since before Elowen's marriage. Neither man met her eyes. Rook extended a gloved hand. "His Grace requires you to leave the property. He ordered me outside the gates. I am outside. This carriage belongs to Harrow Hall. It was purchased with my marriage settlement." Rook's smile disappeared. "Then you will not object if we inspect it." Elowen placed herself between him and the compartment. "You already have." The slashed seats and scattered documents made that obvious. Crowell glanced at Rook. The movement was quick, but Elowen caught it. The older gamekeeper had not known what had been done to her carriage. Rook climbed onto the step. The scarred wolf lunged from the darkness. Rook swung his rifle around, but Crowell seized the barrel before he could fire. "You'll hit her, Grace!" The wolf stopped several yards away, its head lowered. The rest of the pack moved between the trees, surrounding the carriage without approaching the men. Peter Voss crossed himself. Elowen used their distraction to slip the open ledger behind the torn seat. She kept the forged order against her body. "Your men are frightened," she said. "Take them back before the pack decides you are a threat." Rook looked past her into the dark interior. "Wolves do not guard carriages. No, they guard the wounded." For the first time, genuine alarm entered his face. He knew someone was inside. Rook shoved Crowell away and raised his rifle again. Elowen caught the barrel with both hands. "If you fire, Alistair will hear it." He heard the first shot. "And when I tell him you fired at his wife, you are no longer his concern, but his reputation is. If I die outside his gates while his guests are still dining, even the Dowager Duchess cannot make the scandal disappear." Rook hesitated. Elowen twisted the rifle aside and called toward the house. "Mrs. Wren, send for the Duke." Rook struck her across the face. The blow threw her against the carriage wall. Behind the hidden panel, the surveyor gave a muffled groan. Crowell stared at Rook in horror. "You hit the Duchess. I stopped a hysterical woman from summoning his Grace into danger." "No," Elowen said, tasting blood. "You stopped me from showing him what you placed in my carriage." The gate opened. Alistair came down the road carrying a lantern, his evening coat covered by a long greatcoat. Lavinia followed beneath an umbrella held by a footman. "What is happening?" Alistair demanded. Rook lowered his weapon. "The Duchess attempted to set the wolves upon us." Elowen almost laughed. The accusation was absurd, yet Alistair's gaze went first to the animals, instead of the bruise forming across her cheek. "Is that true?" he asked. "Do you truly believe I command wolves now?" "I no longer know what to believe." "Then, begin with what you can see." She turned her face toward the lantern. "Your gamekeeper struck me." Alistair's eyes fixed on the red mark. His hand tightened around the lantern handle. Rook spoke quickly. "She seized my rifle. I feared it might discharge." "You fired before I touched it," Elowen said. "At a wolf." "The shot landed beside my foot." Lavinia reached them, breathing heavily. "Must we continue this spectacle?" Elowen has always possessed a talent for making accidents appear like persecution. Elowen looked at her husband. Search Rook's right glove. Rook went still. There was a black feather caught in its stitching when he closed the gates, she continued. The same kind used on every arrow found in the slaughtered deer. Rook removed his gloves and turned them inside out. There was no feather. Your Grace may inspect them, he said. Alistair did so. His disappointment seemed directed not at Rook, but at Elowen. Enough. He removed it. Of course he did, Lavinia said softly. Every missing piece of evidence becomes further proof in her imagination. The hidden compartment creaked. All heads turned toward the carriage. Rook reached for his rifle, but Elowen blocked the door. There is a wounded man inside, she said. He requires a physician. Alistair stepped forward. Who? A royal surveyor. The color left Lavinia's face. It vanished so quickly that Elowen might have missed it had she not been watching. Rook climbed into the carriage before Alistair could stop him. He tore away the upholstery and opened the compartment. It was empty. Only a smear of fresh blood remained. Elowen stared at the narrow space. There was no second door and no opening through the carriage floor. The wounded man could not have vanished without passing directly beside her. Rook straightened slowly. No surveyor, Your Grace. He was here. Elowen knelt and touched the blood. It was warm. He had been shot with one of the black arrows. Alistair's expression closed. Rook held up a blood-stained scrap of pale fabric. This appears to be from a woman's gown, Lavinia gasped with perfect timing. Elowen recognized the material. It had been cut from the hem of her own riding dress. Rook searched farther beneath the seat and withdrew a small velvet purse. He emptied its contents into his palm. The Dowager Duchess's emerald brooch fell beneath the lantern light. Lavinia touched her bare throat. She stole it from my room. No, Elowen said. He planted it. Alistair looked from the brooch to the blood on his wife's hands. Behind the carriage, the wolves suddenly scattered. A rider was approaching from the northern road at full speed. The horse reached them without a saddle, its flanks streaked with foam. A leather dispatch pouch hung from its neck. Alistair broke the royal seal and read the message inside. His face hardened with every line. What does it say? Lavinia asked. He lifted his gaze to Elowen. The king's chief surveyor disappeared on Harrow land this afternoon. A witness saw him enter your carriage. Elowen looked toward the empty compartment. Alistair folded the dispatch. And the crown has ordered me to hold the last person seen with him on suspicion of murder. Alistair did not order his men to seize Elowen immediately. For 3 long seconds, he stared at her as if searching for the woman he had married beneath the blood, snow, and accusations. Then Lavinia touched his arm. The crown has given you no choice. He looked away. Crowell, escort the Duchess to the old gatehouse. Elowen's breath caught. You mean to imprison me? Until the magistrate arrives. Search the forest first. The surveyor cannot have gone far with an arrow in his shoulder. Rook stepped between them. If there was ever a wounded man, Elowen turned on him. You know there was. What I know is that we found stolen property and a woman's blood inside your carriage. It is my blood. He cut this fabric from my dress. She lifted the torn edge of her skirt. The missing section matched the scrap Rook had displayed, but he merely shook his head. That proves only that the cloth belongs to you. Elowen looked at Alistair. Examine my hand. The blood came from the doe that Rook's men shot. Alistair took 1 step toward her. The king's order is clear, Lavinia interrupted. If you ignore it because the suspect is your wife, the crown will assume you share her guilt. That was the true weapon, not the brooch, the forged ledger, or the planted blood, but Alistair's terror of appearing weak before the royal court. Elowen saw the precise moment he surrendered to it. Take her away, he said. Crowell removed his coat and placed it around Elowen's shoulders before guiding her toward the gatehouse. Rook objected, but Alistair silenced him with a look. It was a small mercy. Once, Elowen might have mistaken it for loyalty. The old gatehouse contained a narrow bed, an empty fireplace, and 1 barred window overlooking the forest. Rook locked the outer door, leaving Crowell inside as guard. Elowen waited until the footsteps faded. You stopped him from shooting the wolf, she said. Crowell kept his eyes on the floor. I did not wish you harmed, but you will keep me locked here while a wounded man freezes outside? I have my orders. From your duke or from Silas Rook? His head lifted. Elowen approached him carefully. You were surprised when you saw my carriage torn apart. You did not know Rook had searched it. I know nothing about that. You also know the deer were not killed by hungry tenants. Crowell's mouth tightened. She pressed the advantage. The carcasses were left untouched. The arrows were poisoned, and all the wounds were deliberately placed where the animals would run before dying. Someone wanted them discovered across different parts of the estate. Stop asking questions. Why? Because people who ask them disappear. The admission hung between them. Crowell moved to the window and checked the road before lowering his voice. 6 weeks ago, the old head keeper found wagons crossing the northern boundary after midnight. He told the Duke he intended to investigate. Mr. Pell retired because of his health. That is what Rook told everyone. Where is he? Crowell swallowed. No one has seen him since. A faint scraping came from beneath the floor. Both of them froze. The sound repeated. 3 slow scratches. A pause. Then 2 more. Elowen knelt beside the bed. One floorboard bore fresh marks around its iron nails. Crowell drew a knife and pried it loose. A strip of leather lay in the hollow beneath it. Elowen recognized the strap from the royal surveyor's dispatch case. Wrapped inside was a brass instrument no longer than her finger, the movable arm from a surveyor's compass. Dark blood filled the engraved measurement lines. He was here, she whispered. Crowell looked toward the locked door. That is impossible. Rook has held the gatehouse key since yesterday, unless the surveyor never entered through the door. Elowen examined the floor. Cold air rose through the gap. Beneath the gatehouse was an old drainage tunnel built when the estate walls had first been erected. Most believed it had collapsed decades earlier. The man had escaped her carriage through a concealed panel, crawled beneath it, and reached the tunnel while everyone argued outside. The ledgers had never been meant merely to incriminate Elowen. They had directed her toward him. Perhaps he placed this here so I would find it, she said. Crowell's face hardened with fear. Then someone knew you would be imprisoned in this exact room. The key turned in the lock. Crowell dropped the loose board into place and stood over it. Rook entered, carrying Elowen's medicine case. The magistrate will arrive at noon tomorrow, he said. Until then, His Grace has permitted you a blanket and your remedies. How charitable. Rook placed the case on the table. Crowell, the Duke wants you at the house. My orders were to guard her. They have changed. Crowell hesitated before leaving. As he passed Elowen, he pressed something small into her palm, the brass compass arm. Rook locked the door behind him and faced her alone. You should have remained at the gates, he said. You should have removed the feather more carefully. A piece remains caught beneath the seam of your glove. His eyes dropped involuntarily toward his right hand. Elowen smiled without warmth. Thank you. Rook seized her wrist. You will tell the magistrate that the surveyor entered your carriage already wounded. You panicked, tempted to treat him, and he died before revealing his business here. And where is his body? You buried it in the forest. In frozen ground? His grip tightened. You were always too observant, he murmured. That is why the Dowager wanted you gone before the inspection. There it was, the first direct thread connecting Lavinia to the scheme. Before Elowen could draw more from him, a bell rang from Harrow Hall. Once, twice, then continuously. The estate's fire alarm. Rook released her and ran outside, locking the door behind him. Orange light rose beyond the window, but it did not come from the main house. Flames were consuming the West Lodge, where Elowen had hidden the accused tenant families. She threw her shoulder against the door. It did not move. Then smoke began curling upward through the loosened floorboard. The drainage tunnel beneath her room was burning too. Elowen opened her medicine case, searching for anything she could use to break the barred window. Instead, she found a blood-soaked royal glove resting on top of her bottles. Inside one finger was a folded message. Your husband signed the deed at 11. At midnight, the forest, and everyone hiding within it, will belong to the crown's enemy. Elowen held the message above the rising smoke. The paper carried no signature, but the precise handwriting belonged to someone educated, someone with access to royal stationery and her medicine case. The flames beneath the floor intensified. She overturned the washstand, soaked the blanket, and pressed it against the gaps between the boards. It slowed the smoke, but would not stop the fire spreading through the drainage tunnel. Outside, bells continued ringing as servants ran toward the West Lodge. No one came near the gatehouse. Elowen searched her medicine case. She found scissors, bandages, several glass bottles, and a small jar of corrosive salve used to remove diseased tissue from animals' wounds. She spread the salve across the rusted screws, securing the window bars, then wrapped a bandage around one bar and pulled. The metal shifted, but not enough. A heavy impact sounded beneath her. The loose floorboard lifted. The wounded surveyor emerged through the smoke, gasping as he dragged himself into the room. His shoulder wound had reopened, and his coat was scorched along one sleeve. You escaped the carriage through the tunnel, Elowen said. I thought it safer than being found by Rook. Then you hid the compass arm beneath this floor. He nodded. In case they caught me before I could return. His legs collapsed. Elowen guided him away from the burning boards. What is your name? Thomas Vale, deputy surveyor to the crown. Who shot you? I never saw his face. Only black-feathered arrows coming from the trees. She cut away his coat. The arrow had passed through the muscle below his shoulder without striking bone, but dark veins spread around the wound. Poison, she said. The same substance used on the deer. Can you treat it? If we survive the next 5 minutes. Elowen poured spirits over her scissors and cut the arrowhead free. Vale bit down on his glove to silence his cry. The boundary deed, she said while packing the wound with charcoal paste. What does it transfer? Not merely the forest. Everything north of the old Roman road, the lodge, 3 villages, and the abandoned chapel. To whom? Lord Cassian Vane. Elowen knew the name. Vane had served as a military envoy until the king dismissed him for negotiating secretly with a foreign minister. Alistair had recently welcomed him to Harrow Hall twice. Why would the crown permit such a transfer? It would not. The king sent my superior to verify the boundary before approving the deed. He disappeared yesterday. The chief surveyor. Vale's face tightened. We found his horse near the chapel. There was blood in the snow, but no body. Elowen remembered his warning in the carriage. The forest hides a royal grave. Vale looked toward the floor. The chapel stands over a medieval burial vault. Someone opened it recently. Who was buried there? According to the official record, minor members of the Harrow family, but we found a coffin bearing the crest of King Edmund's eldest brother. Prince Frederick had disappeared 28 years earlier after being accused of conspiring against the crown. His body had never been recovered. If proof emerged that the Harrow family had concealed his murder, Alistair could lose his title, his lands, and perhaps his life. The weakened window bar finally gave way. Elowen pulled it aside, but the opening was too narrow for Vale in his condition. Go, he urged. Take the compass arm to the royal magistrate. The measurements engraved upon it correspond to the true boundary markers. I will not leave you to burn. Elowen? Alistair's voice sounded outside. She rushed to the window. He was running toward the gatehouse, carrying an axe. Rook followed several steps behind with his rifle. Stand away from the door, Alistair shouted. He struck the lock twice before breaking it. Smoke poured out as he entered. Elowen was kneeling beside Vale when Alistair found them. Shock replaced the suspicion on his face. You told the truth. You might try believing me before nearly killing me next time. The words struck him harder than accusation. He lifted Vale while Elowen gathered her case. Rook appeared in the doorway. His gaze settled on the surveyor. That man murdered the chief surveyor, he said. I saw him fleeing the chapel. Vale struggled in Alistair's arms. Liar. Rook raised his rifle. Alistair turned, shielding Vale with his body. Lower it. He is dangerous, Your Grace. That is an order. For the first time, Rook openly defied him. His finger tightened around the trigger. The scarred wolf leaped through the smoke and struck Rook from the side. The shot flew into the ceiling. Burning timber collapsed between them, separating Rook from the others. Alistair carried Vale outside. Elowen followed as the gatehouse roof fell inward. Across the estate, the West Lodge burned fiercely. Those families are inside, Elowen said. Alistair handed Vale to Kroll and ran toward the lodge with her. Servants formed a chain from the well, but the frozen pump produced only a thin stream. The rear door, Elowen called. There is a root cellar beneath the kitchen. They reached the entrance and found it chained from outside. Alistair stared at the iron links. His tenants had not become trapped accidentally. Someone had intended to burn them alive. He broke the chain with his axe. Elowen descended into the smoke-filled cellar and found 19 people huddled beneath wet blankets. She led the children out first, while Alistair carried the injured. When the last tenant reached safety, the lodge windows exploded behind them. Lavinia stood among the gathered guests, watching her son emerge with soot across his face. The deed, Elowen said to him. Did you sign it? Alistair looked at his mother. She told me the transfer would settle our debts. At midnight, Vane will own this land. Rook tried to murder everyone who could challenge his claim. Alistair's face changed as he understood what his pride and blind trust had enabled. A carriage appeared on the southern road. 4 royal guards rode beside it. The magistrate, Lavinia whispered. But the man who stepped from the carriage was not a magistrate. Lord Cassian Vane unfolded the signed boundary deed and glanced toward the burning lodge. The transfer is complete, he announced. These people are trespassers now. and Duchess Elowen is under arrest for the murder of a royal officer. Behind him, 2 guards dragged a covered body from the carriage. A black feathered arrow protruded from its chest. Around its neck hung Elowen's missing wedding pendant. Elowen stared at the pendant resting against the dead man's coat. Alistair had given it to her on their wedding morning. A gold hawthorn leaf engraved with the words, "Where you stand, I stand." She had last seen it inside her locked jewelry box. Lord Vane removed the covering from the body. The dead man was middle-aged, his collar bearing the insignia of the Crown's chief surveyor. "Mr. Gideon Shaw was found buried near the ruined chapel," Vane said. "A tenant witnessed Duchess Elowen meeting him there yesterday." "That is false," Elowen replied. Vane signaled to the guards. A frightened young man was brought forward. Will Mercer was the eldest son of one of the families Elowen had hidden inside the lodge. "Tell the Duke what you saw," Vane ordered. Will lowered his eyes. "Her Grace entered the chapel with Mr. Shaw. I heard them arguing. Later she came out alone." Elowen studied his face. There was soot on his cheek and a bruise around his throat. "Where is your sister, Will?" His silence answered her. Vane had taken the girl to control his testimony. Alistair stepped between Elowen and the guards. "No one arrests my wife until a royal magistrate examines the evidence." Vane smiled. "You signed away your authority over this land. The deed was obtained through fraud. Then challenge it in London. Until a court overturns it, the forest and everyone standing upon it belong under my jurisdiction." Elowen moved closer to Alistair. "Ask to see the royal warrant." Vane's smile weakened. Alistair extended his hand. "The warrant. I carry orders from the Crown." "Then show them." For the first time that night, Alistair refused to let another person's certainty replace his judgment. Vane produced a folded document. Alistair examined the seal, but Elowen watched the guards. Their uniforms appeared correct, yet their boots carried pale clay. The southern road crossed dark marsh soil. Only the northern chapel road contained white limestone. They had brought the body from the forest, not from the magistrate's office. "These are not royal guards," she said. One man drew his pistol. Krall struck his arm before he could fire. The weapon discharged into the snow, throwing the courtyard into chaos. Alistair pulled Elowen behind an overturned water cart. Vale, barely conscious, crawled toward them. "Vane cannot take the chapel," he gasped. "The transfer uses false boundary markers." Elowen removed the brass compass arm from her pocket. "Can this prove it?" "With the original survey book. Shaw hid it before they killed him." "Where?" Vale looked toward the burning lodge. Inside the collar of a wolf, a shot struck the cart. Rook had escaped the gatehouse. He stood beside Vane, blood running from claw marks across his cheek. "Bring me the Duchess alive," Vane shouted. Lavinia tried to retreat toward Harrow Hall. Vane caught her wrist. "You assured me Elowen would be gone before midnight." Alistair heard him. His mother's face crumpled. "I only wanted her removed from the estate. You said no one would be harmed. You gave Rook access to her rooms," Alistair said. Lavinia turned to her son. "I did it for you. Her interference made you appear weak." "No. My willingness to believe you made me weak." Rook fired again. Elowen pulled Vale behind the stone well as tenants rushed the false guards with shovels and burning timber. They had nearly died because Alistair abandoned them, yet they fought to protect the estate Elowen had made their home. The scarred wolf appeared near the forest. A narrow leather collar circled its neck. Elowen ran toward it. Rook saw her and pursued. She crossed the frozen road, following the wolf into the trees. Its tracks led toward a ravine where an abandoned charcoal burner's hut stood beneath the pines. Inside, the animal allowed Elowen to remove the collar. Several tightly folded pages were sewn beneath the leather. The original survey book. The entries showed that the ruined chapel and burial vault stood beyond the land described in Alistair's deed. Vane's claim was invalid. Another document was hidden between the pages, a list of payments bearing Lavinia's signature. Footsteps sounded outside. Rook entered with his rifle raised. "You should have remained ignorant," he said. "You killed Shaw because he found the grave. I killed him because he discovered what was missing from it." Elowen glanced at the payment list. "Prince Frederick's body?" Rook laughed. "The coffin never held a prince." "Then what is Vane trying to hide?" "The truth about who has been sitting on the throne for 28 years. He aimed at her heart. Before he could fire, the scarred wolf attacked. Rook stumbled backward, and the shot tore through the roof. Elowen seized a burning poker from the hearth and struck his wrist. The rifle fell. Rook drew a knife and lunged, but Alistair appeared in the doorway and knocked him against the wall. The two men crashed through the rotten boards. Rook escaped into the darkness, leaving a trail of blood. Alistair looked at the papers in Elowen's hands. "I should have listened to you." "Yes," she said. "You should have." No forgiveness softened her voice. A horn sounded from Harrow Hall, the signal announcing a royal arrival. Elowen and Alistair returned, to find Vane gone. Lavinia remained under guard, and the tenants had captured 2 of his men. A second carriage had entered the courtyard. This time, the crest upon its door truly belonged to the crown. A woman in mourning black stepped down. Although nearly 60, her face appeared on every coin minted before the present king's marriage. Queen Dowager Adelaide looked directly at Elowen. "I received Gideon Shaw's final message," she said. "He claimed you could show me where my missing son is buried." Elowen held up the survey book. "Your Majesty, I believe someone has spent 28 years ensuring you searched the wrong grave." Queen Dowager Adelaide ordered everyone into Harrow Hall. Lord Vane had escaped with Rook, but the snow made concealment difficult. Royal soldiers followed their tracks north, while Elowen, Alistair, Lavinia, and Thomas Vale were taken to the library. The Queen Dowager placed Gideon Shaw's final message beside the survey book. "My son Frederick was accused of plotting against his brother," she said. "Before he could stand trial, he disappeared. The Harrow family reported finding his body and sealed the coffin under the chapel." Elowen opened the book to a page marked with Shaw's blood. "The burial vault lies outside the boundary transferred to Vane. The deed gives him no legal claim to it, unless the markers are moved before sunrise," Vale said weakly. "Once Vane's men replace them, he can argue the copied map is accurate." "Then we go to the chapel now," the Queen replied. Lavinia stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the vault is unstable. Entering it would be dangerous." Adelaide turned toward her. "You seem remarkably familiar with a place supposedly sealed for 28 years. Lavinia's composure cracked. Alistair watched his mother as if seeing a stranger. "What did you do?" "I preserved this family. By framing my wife? I intended only to discredit her. Vane promised the royal investigation would end once she left Harrow. You gave him access to her rooms and allowed him to plant evidence. You were losing control of your estate because she encouraged tenants to question you." "No," Elowen said. "They questioned the theft of their grain, the unexplained rents, and the armed wagons crossing their land." Adelaide ordered Lavinia detained. As guards approached, the Dowager drew a small key from her sleeve and threw it into the fireplace. Asinolan seized the tongs and retrieved it before the flames consumed its leather cord. "Rook said I observed too much," she said, examining the blackened key. "What does this open?" Lavinia said nothing. The key bore a tiny hawthorn tree, the Harrow family emblem used before Alistair's grandfather redesigned the crest. The old burial vault, Alistair realized. They traveled north in 3 carriages. Elowen rode beside Vale, monitoring his fever. Alistair sat opposite her but did not ask for comfort or forgiveness. "I signed the deed because Vane offered to clear the estate's debts," he said. "I knew you had questioned the accounts. I refused to show them to you because I feared discovering you were right. You chose your pride over the people dependent upon you." "Yes, and when your mother accused me, you chose humiliation over investigation." His voice lowered. "Yes, admitting it could not reverse the harm, but Elowen noted that he no longer hid behind manipulation or misunderstanding." Near dawn, they reached the chapel. Its doors had been forced open. Fresh boot prints descended into the burial vault. Elowen used Lavinia's key on an iron door beneath the altar. Inside stood a stone coffin marked with Prince Frederick's crest. The lid had already been moved. Adelaide approached with trembling hands. The coffin contained no human body, only bundles of rotting military uniforms and an empty silver box. "Rook told me the coffin never held a prince," Elowen said. "Whatever was inside the box must be what Vane wants." Vale examined the interior. There are scratches beneath the cloth. They removed the uniforms and uncovered words carved into the stone. "Frederick lives. Seek the keeper who has no shadow." Alistair lifted his lantern. A painted mural covered the wall behind the coffin. It depicted the Harrow forest during summer, with hunters, horses, and an old keeper standing beneath a tree. Every figure cast a painted shadow except the keeper. Elowen touched the image. The plaster moved under her fingers. A hidden door opened onto a narrow chamber. Inside lay recent blankets, medicine bottles, and a plate containing food no more than a day old. Someone had been living there. On the table rested a miniature portrait of Queen Adelaide holding a blonde boy. Beside it was a sealed letter addressed to Elowen. She broke the wax. "Duchess Harrow, if you are reading this, Vane has learned I survived. Do not trust the royal escort. The traitor wears the king's own face." Hoofbeats thundered above them. a royal officer rushed into the vault. "Your Majesty, the king has arrived." Queen Adelaide went pale. From outside came the voice of her younger son, the reigning monarch, ordering his soldiers to seal the chapel and execute everyone inside for treason. The royal officer drew his sword. Alistair struck first, slamming the man against the stone wall. Vale seized the fallen weapon, while Elowen pulled Queen Adelaide into the hidden chamber. "Is that truly the king outside?" Elowen asked. Adelaide listened to the voice echoing through the chapel. "It is Edmund. Could Vane have forged the order? My son would never command my execution without hearing me." A bitter smile touched Vale's face. "Perhaps that is why Prince Frederick wrote that the traitor wears the king's face." Soldiers entered the chapel above them. Alistair dragged the unconscious officer behind the coffin. "Is there another exit?" Elowen studied the chamber. The blankets, food, and medicine proved someone had entered recently without using the vault door. Cold air moved across her cheek. She followed it to the painted image of a hawthorn tree. Behind a loose stone lay a narrow passage descending into darkness. They entered as soldiers reached the vault. The tunnel ended at an old hunting lodge half a mile beyond the chapel. A fire still burned inside, but the rooms were empty. On the table lay maps marked with the routes taken by royal messengers. Black arrows indicated places where couriers had disappeared. Elowen examined a row of medicine bottles. These contained the same aconite mixture used on the deer and surveyors. Alistair looked around. "Then this belongs to Rook." "No." She held up one bottle. "The dosage is written in a physician's hand." The rear door opened. An elderly man entered carrying a pistol. His white beard hid much of his face, but Adelaide recognized his blue eyes. Frederick. The weapon dropped from his hand. Queen Adelaide crossed the room and embraced the son she had mourned for 28 years. Prince Frederick explained that he had discovered a conspiracy within the royal household shortly before his disappearance. Edmund's advisors were selling military routes to foreign agents. When Frederick attempted to expose them, evidence of treason had been planted in his rooms. "The old Duke of Harrow helped me escape," he said. "He sealed an empty coffin and hid me while I gathered proof." "Why remain silent for so long?" Alistair asked. "Because Edmund was not merely surrounded by traitors. He became their leader." Elowen placed the forged payment list on the table. "And Vane?" "Edmund's illegitimate son. The forest transfer would give him control of the hidden route beneath the chapel and destroy every record of my survival." A rifle shattered the window. Alistair pushed Elowen down as the bullet crossed the room. Rook and Vane appeared outside with royal soldiers. Behind them stood King Edmund in ceremonial black. "Frederick!" the king called. "Come out, and mother may live." Adelaide moved toward the door, but Frederick stopped her. Elowen searched the maps. One showed an underground channel running from the lodge to the frozen lake. Beside it was a note in Gideon Shaw's handwriting. "Drain gate controlled beneath eastern hearth." She pulled away the iron fire screen and found a rusted lever. "What happens if we open it?" Alistair asked. "The channel floods." Vane's soldiers were approaching across the thin ice behind the lodge. Elowen pulled the lever. A deep crack rolled beneath the ground. Water surged through the old channel, splitting the lake ice between the lodge and the soldiers. Vane retreated, but Rook leaped across the widening gap. He broke through the rear door with his rifle raised. Frederick fired first. Rook collapsed, wounded in the leg. Elowen took his rifle while Alistair restrained him. Outside, King Edmund ordered his archers to burn the lodge. Flaming arrows struck the roof. Rook laughed through his pain. "You still do not understand. Frederick cannot expose the king without the silver box." "Where is it?" Elowen demanded. "Your dowager duchess stole it from the coffin years ago." All eyes turned toward Lavinia's empty place beside the wall. She had vanished through the flooded passage. Clutched in Rook's hand was the blackened vault key and a note Lavinia had left behind. "Bring Elowen to Harrow Hall before noon, or the evidence proving Frederick's innocence will burn with her tenants." Flames spread across the lodge roof as Elowen read Lavinia's message a second time. The dowager had returned to Harrow Hall. The tenants who had escaped the West Lodge were now her hostages, and the silver box containing Prince Frederick's evidence was somewhere inside the estate. "She wants me," Elowen said. "I will go." "No!" Alistair tore down a burning curtain before it could ignite the wall. "My mother has already tried to imprison and kill you. She did not ask for you. That means she believes I know something she needs." Frederick helped Adelaide into the underground passage. "The channel leads beneath the eastern edge of Harrowland. We can reach the estate unseen." Rook laughed from the floor. "If you can hold your breath." Water was already rising through the tunnel. Elowen knelt beside him. "Why does Lavinia need me?" His expression changed when she opened her medicine case. "I will not torture you," she said, "but the poison on that arrow is spreading from your wound. If I leave without treating it, you may not survive the hour. You are a duchess. I heal suffering, even when the patient deserves judgment." Rook stared at her, unable to understand a mercy that did not include forgiveness. "The silver box has 2 locks," he finally said. "Lavinia possesses 1 key. The second was hidden in your wedding pendant." Elowen looked toward the pendant found on Gideon Shaw's body. "That was why she placed it on him," Alistair said. "She wanted it recovered as evidence against Elowen while keeping the key nearby." "Vane took the pendant after displaying the body," Rook said. "Lavinia needs the Duchess because Vane believes she still has it." "And what is inside the box?" "Letters written by King Edmund to foreign agents, lists of payments, orders for the murder of witnesses." Elowen treated Rook's wound, then bound his hands. King Edmund's soldiers surrounded the burning lodge, but the cracking ice prevented them from approaching the rear. The group descended into the flooded passage moments before the roof collapsed. The water reached Elowen's waist, then her chest. Alistair remained behind her, supporting Vale while Frederick guided Adelaide. Halfway through the tunnel, they found Lavinia's cloak caught on an iron rung. Drops of blood marked the stones ahead. "She was injured," Elowen said. "Not badly enough," Adelaide replied coldly. The passage ended inside an abandoned mill near Harrow village. Kroll and several tenants were waiting there with horses. They had escaped the estate after Lavinia returned with 6 of Vane's armed men. "She locked the women and children in the grain barn," Kroll reported. "The men are being held in the Great Hall." "What of Vane?" Alistair asked. "He rode toward the northern road. He carries the Duchess's pendant." Frederick offered to pursue him, but Elowen shook her head. "Vane expects us to divide our forces. The evidence matters only if witnesses survive to hear it." They approached Harrow Hall through the servants' orchard. Elowen knew every outbuilding, passage, and disused entrance because she had spent years managing the estate while Alistair attended Parliament. That knowledge now gave her the authority he had denied her. She assigned Kroll to free the men in the Great Hall. Frederick and the Queen would enter through the old chapel room, while Alistair accompanied Elowen to the grain barn. "You should remain outside," he said quietly. "Do not mistake regret for the right to command me." He accepted the rebuke. "Then tell me what you need. Follow my lead." They reached the barn and found 2 armed guards at the entrance. Elowen opened a nearby sheep pen. Frightened animals rushed through the yard, knocking one man down while Alistair disarmed the other. Inside the barn, smoke drifted from a pile of burning straw. Elowen and Alistair extinguished it before freeing the families. Will Mercer's young sister was among them, bound separately but unharmed. "Lady Lavinia told Lord Vane to kill us," the girl said. "He refused until he had the second key." Elowen led the tenants through the orchard, then entered Harrow Hall by the kitchen passage. Lavinia waited in the ballroom beneath an enormous portrait of Alistair's grandfather. The silver box stood on a table before her. "You survived," she said. "So did every person you tried to burn." Lavinia's face showed no remorse. "Those tenants will testify for whoever feeds them. They saw Vane's false guards. They saw Rook fire upon us. Will Mercer will confess why he lied. None of it matters without what is inside this box." She inserted her key into the first lock. The second remained closed. "Where is your pendant?" "Vane has it." "Then you are useless to me." Lavinia reached for a pistol hidden beneath her shawl, but Elowen had anticipated the movement. She threw a glass bottle from her medicine case. It shattered against the floor, releasing a sharp cloud of ammonia. Lavinia staggered back, coughing. Alistair entered and removed the pistol from her hand. His mother stared at him. "You would choose her over your own blood?" "I should have chosen the truth before either of you." He did not ask Elowen to praise him for finally doing what honor required. Queen Adelaide and Frederick entered with royal soldiers who had rejected Edmund's unlawful orders. The tenants gathered at the ballroom doors as Lavinia was placed under guard. Then hoofbeats sounded in the courtyard. Vane had returned. He entered alone, holding Elowen's pendant in one hand, and a royal pardon bearing King Edmund's seal in the other. "I possess the second key," he announced. "But if you open that box, every person in this room becomes guilty of treason." Queen Adelaide stepped forward. "Against whom?" A second figure appeared behind Vane. King Edmund walked into Harrow Hall wearing his crown. "Against me," he said. He raised a pistol, not at Frederick, but at Elowen. "Give me the silver box, Duchess, or your husband will watch you die for the choice he made." Alistair moved in front of Elowen. King Edmund aimed the pistol at his chest. How fitting. The Duke who condemned his wife without evidence now intends to die before hearing mine. You ordered the murders, Elowen said from behind Alistair. If that box contained nothing, you would not fear opening it. Edmund glanced at the silver case. That moment of distraction was enough. Elowen pushed Alistair aside and threw the remaining bottle from her medicine case. It shattered against the king's wrist. His shot struck the ceiling as the pistol fell. Frederick seized Edmund while the royal soldiers surrounded Vane. "Stand down," Adelaide commanded. Vane held up the royal pardon. "His Majesty has granted me protection from every accusation. A pardon cannot excuse crimes committed after it was issued," Elowen said. She examined the date. The ink appeared fresh, but the wax seal had darkened with age. He used a blank document bearing an old royal seal. Vane's face tightened. Elowen took her wedding pendant from his hand. A nearly invisible catch ran along the golden leaf's edge. When she pressed it, a slender key slid free. Alistair stared at the pendant. "My grandfather gave it to me." "I never knew. Your grandfather knew the letters might one day be needed," Frederick said. Elowen inserted the key into the silver box. King Edmund struggled against his brother. "Those papers are forgeries. Then you should welcome their examination," Adelaide replied. Both locks opened. Inside lay dozens of letters, coded payment records, and a royal signet wrapped in black cloth. Frederick unfolded the first letter, but the ink had faded until most of the words were unreadable. Edmund laughed. 28 years in a damp vault have destroyed your proof." Elowen lifted the page toward the firelight. The paper carried shallow impressions from another letter once written above it. "The words are still here." She requested charcoal from the hearth, crushed it finely, and brushed it lightly across the page. Hidden lines appeared where the quill had pressed into the fibers. Frederick read aloud, "Remove my brother before he reaches Parliament. Harrow will provide the empty grave. Vane will control the northern route." The letter bore Edmund's private mark. More impressions revealed orders to poison royal couriers, falsify the Harrow boundary, and place weapons in tenant cottages, so resistance could be described as rebellion. Every crime led back to the king. Edmund stopped struggling. Vane suddenly drew a knife and seized Lavinia. "Open the courtyard doors, or she dies." Lavinia looked at the son she had helped seize Harrow land. "You promised to protect me. You were useful until you failed." Elowen saw the wounded pride in Lavinia's face, the same pride that had driven her to destroy anyone she could not control. "Tell them where the remaining records are," Elowen said. Lavinia remained silent. "Vane will kill you whether the doors open or not. The truth is the only thing you can still choose." The knife pressed against her throat. "The estate chapel room," Lavinia gasped. "Behind the portrait of the first Duke of Harrow." Vane dragged her toward the door, but Krall opened the servants' entrance behind him. The freed tenants rushed forward. Vane released Lavinia and tried to escape through the ballroom window. Alistair blocked his path. Vane swung the knife, cutting his arm. Alistair did not retreat. He knocked Vane down, then stepped away instead of killing him. "Let him stand trial," Elowen said. The royal soldiers bound Vane beside Edmund. Morning light entered the windows, as more records were retrieved from the chapel room. They confirmed that Lavinia had knowingly financed Rook's false poaching attacks and helped forge Elowen's signature. They also proved Alistair had signed the boundary deed after receiving written warnings from his wife and estate steward. He did not hide the page. "Read that one aloud too," he said. The document showed every opportunity he had been given to investigate, and every warning he had dismissed. Queen Adelaide turned to the assembled tenants and officers. "King Edmund will answer before Parliament. Prince Frederick's innocence will be formally restored. Lord Vane, Silas Rook, and their accomplices will face trial." Then she faced Lavinia. "And the Dowager Duchess of Harrow will be charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, unlawful imprisonment, and falsification of royal evidence." Lavinia looked desperately at Alistair. He did not intervene. Elowen approached the tenants. "Will Mercer testified falsely because Vane held his sister. His statement against me must not become another weapon against his family." Adelaide nodded. "The coercion will be entered into the record." With the immediate danger ended, Alistair crossed the ballroom toward Elowen. Blood ran from the cut on his arm. "I will publicly withdraw every accusation," he said. "The estate accounts, northern lands, and authority over the tenants will be placed under your control. They were never yours to offer as forgiveness. No, they are restitution." Before Elowen could answer, Thomas Vale opened the final compartment inside the silver box. It contained their marriage settlement. A clause written in Alistair's grandfather's hand declared that if a Duke of Harrow publicly disgraced his wife without lawful proof, Ownership of the entire estate passed immediately to her. Vale looked at Elowen. "Your Grace, from the moment your husband locked those gates, Harrow Hall legally became yours." Silence settled over the ballroom. Alistair read the marriage clause, then handed the settlement to Elowen without protest. "Harrow Hall is yours," he said. "I will not challenge it." Queen Adelaide ordered the document examined by the royal solicitor. The seal, signatures, and witnesses were valid. Alistair's public accusation and unlawful imprisonment had activated the clause before he signed away the northern forest. Because he no longer owned the land at the time of the transfer, Vane's deed was void. The tenants were no longer trespassers. Neither Vane nor Edmund controlled the chapel, the villages, or the hidden royal route. By noon, the Great Hall had become a public court. Tenants, servants, royal officers, and surviving witnesses gathered beneath the Harrow banners. Thomas Vale presented the original survey book and identified the false boundary markers. Gideon Shaw's papers established how he had concealed evidence in Elowen's carriage before Rook shot him. Crowell testified that Rook staged the poaching attacks with poisoned black-feathered arrows. The dead deer were placed near the homes of tenants who had challenged the missing grain and increased rents. Will Mercer admitted that Vane threatened his sister to force him to accuse Elowen. Lavinia confessed to stealing Elowen's pendant, opening her rooms to Rook, and financing the campaign against her. She claimed she had acted to preserve Harrow's power, but her own records proved that she knew innocent families might die. Finally, Alistair stood before everyone he had failed. "My wife warned me about the accounts, the gamekeeper, and the boundary deed," he said. "I dismissed her because accepting her judgment wounded my pride. When evidence appeared against her, I chose public humiliation instead of investigation. No conspiracy forced me to lock those gates. That choice was mine." He withdrew every accusation against Elowen and surrendered his seat in the county magistracy. He transferred his personal fortune, not the estate's money, to rebuild the West Lodge, compensate the displaced families, and provide pensions for Gideon Shaw's dependents. King Edmund was taken to London under guard to answer before Parliament. Frederick was formally cleared of treason and named regent until the succession could be lawfully settled. Vane faced charges of murder, fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Rook survived his wounds and testified in exchange for avoiding execution, though he would spend the remainder of his life in prison. Lavinia lost her position, income, and residence at Harrow Hall. Elowen did not seek revenge beyond the law. The dowager was taken away to await trial for attempted murder and falsifying royal evidence. In the following weeks, Elowen assumed full control of the estate. She restored the tenants' leases, reopened the grain stores, and appointed Crollo head keeper. Hunting traps were removed from the forest, and protected paths were established around the wolves' territory. Alistair remained only long enough to assist the royal investigation. He never entered Elowen's rooms, or used their marriage to demand an audience. On the morning he was due to leave, Elowen found him outside the same iron gates where he had abandoned her. Snow covered the road. His carriage waited nearby, but he carried no ducal insignia. "I once told you the forest could decide whether it wanted its mistress," he said. "It answered more honorably than I did." Elowen held the gate key in her hand. "Do you expect forgiveness?" "No." "Do you expect me to ask you to remain?" "No." He looked toward Harrow Hall. "I hope that one day my actions may become useful enough to stand beside my apology. But whether you ever witness them must be your choice." That was the first gift he had offered without concealing a demand inside it. Elowen opened the gates. Not to welcome him home, but to let him leave. Alistair entered his carriage and departed alone. She did not promise reconciliation. He would have to build a life of accountability beyond her sight, while she discovered who she could become without carrying his pride. The scarred wolf appeared at the forest's edge. Elowen walked toward it with her medicine case in one hand and the keys to Harrow in the other. Behind her, the gates remained open, not because anyone had granted her freedom, but because they now belonged to her.